Hold on. Let's see. Okay, next we have Roberto Ragone as Marcantonio will deliver a brief monologue explaining that he'll dramatize an anti-war speech he gave in 1950 as well as a political backdrop of that time. The speech is actually the splicing of two significant speeches from that year. Also, 1950 was Mark's last year in office as the political parties joined forces to defeat him. So I'm going to welcome you, founding member and co-chairman of the Vito Marcantonio Forum, Roberto Ragone.
My friends, the following is an excerpt combining two speeches I gave in 1950 to Congress. One from June 1927, when I stood up as the sole opponent against our entering into the Korean War. And the second from December of that year, in which I warned the United States against a policy of war. Now, I was generally hopeful and optimistic about the ability of the American people to take control of the nation's destiny. I did say in that same year, and I quote, "To those who feel overwhelmed by the seemingly powerful character of the war makers and the profit makers and their tools, the Democrats and Republicans and their flunkies, the false liberals, I say that midnight is ending. Just as the calendar brings this around the turn of a new half-century, so has the clock of events brought us past midnight. We are going to outlive this. However," end of quote, and however, even with that hopefulness and optimism, I risked my political career with the following remarks of outrage and concern to the House of Representatives as the major political parties joined forces against me. Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the proposed appropriations for armaments. Armaments implementing a policy of genuine defense of a people's interest is one thing. But these armaments implement an insane war program which has never been in the interest of the nation and is today definitely not in the interest or defense of the people of the United States. This insane war policy culminated last June with our Operation Desperation in Korea. I do not believe I am subjecting myself to an accusation of immodesty when I now say beyond challenge that I stood up here as the only member of Congress in opposition to our intervention in the civil war in Korea. I did so on the very day on which the President announced our disastrous adventure, and after the Majority Leader read this short statement by the President. In these circumstances, I have ordered the United States Air and Sea Forces to give the Korean government troops cover and support. Mr. Chairman, the words I am using do not adequately describe the disastrous consequences this course will have on the people of the United States if not checked by the people themselves. On June 27th, I said, I would be remiss to the things in which I believe if I did not stand up here and state my opinion on this matter. After all, Mr. Chairman, you only live once, and it is best to live one's life with one's conscience than to temporize or accept with silence those things that one believes to be against the interest of one's people and one's nation. I warned. Here now, we are sending American aviators to lay down their lives, sending American sailors to lay down their lives, and who knows how soon it will be before our infantry will be sent to lay down their lives to defend, aid, and abet aggression against the Korean people who strive for a united and independent nation. Now, you may want this action. I do not. And I know that the American people will not want this action, and they will thrust through this terrible dark cloud of war. On June 27th, I also appeal to you, Mr. Chairman, and my distinguished colleagues, that in light of this background, that before this action can be taken, this question should be debated here and decided here. The vote must be taken here by us as representatives of the American people on whether or not American aviators and seamen shall be shot down, their blood spilled in defense of tyranny in a conflict similar to our own Civil War. That the power to declare war was vested in the Congress of the United States. That power was usurped from us from the reading of that short statement by the President to the people of the world. We here in Congress were asked to supinely accept this usurpation of our right as representatives of the American people. We have abdicated, for I have heard no protest. I have heard not one single word against it. I have no other recourse but to stand up and point out exactly what this action is, how it violates our Constitution and our democratic traditions, and how it deprives the American people of the right to express themselves on the vital question of war and peace, a power and a right properly vested in Congress by those who wisely wrote the Constitution. I shall do all that I can, alone perhaps, but living with my conscience, to oppose this course. Events since June 27th, I maintain, have vindicated the position that I took at that time. There are very few people in America today who do not wish we had never gone into Korea. Oh yes, you can indulge and keep making impassioned pleas about the destruction of communism. But I tell you that the issue in China, the issue in Korea, the issue in Vietnam, and for all peoples in Asia is the right for these peoples to a government of their own, to independence and national unity. But we are fighting against these national aspirations. Now you offer appropriations for more armaments, leading to what? Leading to the acceptance of an increased armaments race and the doctrine of the inevitability of war foisted on the people largely by those who sit in the high seats of government. The only alternative that is offered is world conflict and the use of the atomic bomb. That is the tragic end of the road on which you are dragging the American people. I stated also on June 27th, remember one thing, a bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. It had terrible consequences, but it did not frighten the people of China, it did not frighten the people of Korea, and it did not frighten the people of Asia. Despite the terror of an atomic bomb, they have refused to abandon their efforts for national liberation. So the threat of the use of the atomic bomb has only alienated decent-minded people from us. They will no more abandon the objective than the American people did during our revolution. Mr. Chairman, the best defense of America does not lie in this armaments race. Such a race will lead only to a war which at best no one will win, but which will destroy civilization as we know it. War is not inevitable, but this declaration on the part of President Truman is an acceptance of the doctrine of the inevitability of war. I stand here and challenge that doctrine. The ingenuity of Americans and people all over the world challenge that doctrine. The best defense of these United States is a policy of peace. Our problems can be resolved without the sacrifice of a single American interest, a single interest of the American people. They can be resolved by a policy of courageously carrying out two steps: ceasefire on both sides, and at the same time, an honest negotiation for an honest conclusion for peace. But you cannot enter into these honest negotiations unless you recognize the right of people to self-determination and national unity. I have stood by the fundamental principles for which I have advocated, for all people of all races, creeds, and national origin. I have not trimmed, I have not retreated, I do not apologize, and I am not compromising. Thank you very much.